Hello, welcome to Steve McDonald's Arts and Crafts, and today what I'm going to be talking about is tips and tricks of using resin and all the things that you need to, well, not all the things, but things that you need to know if and when you're using resin. And this is ideal for the beginner who's never used resin before and anyone that has been using resin for a long time as a refresher. And you never know, there might be something in here you don't know about. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is storing resin. Now, I store my resin on a shelf here. I have it all put out exactly how I know I'm going to use it. So I have parts A and parts B together. And I keep it in this shelf. And this room at night is completely dark. And during the day is completely dark unless I have the lights on. And it's important to ensure that your resin is not subjected to direct sunlight even when it's in the bottles, and always make sure that you keep the tops on your resin bottles and don't cross them over either. So don't put the top from part A on the bottle of part B because it will set up and cure up and you won't get the top off. The other thing about this room is it never goes below about 60 degrees, so it keeps the resin at a consistent temperature all the time. It does get warmer in the summer, but during the winter I never let my temperature of my resin get really cold because that can cause problems with your resin as well. So storing resin is really important. Thing is, make sure that you use the right resin for the right project. And as you can see here, I've got a lot of variety of different resins. Not all the same resin. Some's deep cast, some's casting resin, some's art resin, some's jewelry resin, PU resins, epoxy resins, UV resins. Now I have got a video on which resin that you should use for which project, and it will save you a lot of time and a lot of money as well by making sure that you use the right resin for the right project. And I will link that video at the end of this video as well, so it's easy for you to find, tap on, and familiarise yourself about that. When mixing your resin, it's really important to ensure that you use accurate measurements as well, because if not, you then will have problems with curing, either curing far too quickly or never curing at all, or giving that really sticky mush that is neither cured nor uncured. Now, I use different resins, so some of them need measuring out using measurements, and the other thing that's important is to ensure that your measurements are as accurate as possible in whatever you're using. And I've got different jug sizes of silicone jugs. Now these are really cheap. Again, I will link a whole toolkit in the description below that you can get hold of that is absolutely next to nothing. And the other thing that I find is when I'm measuring my resin, if I pour in here up to there of part A, I sometimes, because of the way that these silicone jugs are made, I find it really difficult to read the marks. So before I go ahead and mix the resin, I just take a permanent marker like this. And if it's, say for instance, it's a 1 to 50%, so you need 40 of part A but only 20 of part B, then I will mark on my jugs like that. That's 40, that's 60 on the outside. And then when I'm pouring it, I can see the little line, and that gives it a really accurate measurement. The other thing is, if you're weighing stuff, always make sure that you have a great pair of scales. Tear the jug or whatever you're weighing it out in, and then use that to ensure that you've got exactly the amount that it says on the bottle for the manufacturer's instructions. Don't go over or under. We really don't want to be creating problems before we even start with our resin, because it's vital that you get the measurements right. When you've mixed your resin up, unless it's a really deep pour or slow cure resin and you've mixed up quite a lot, ensure that you decant it into smaller pots to get the work time that you want with it. If you put a large amount of resin in one pot and leave it in there and keep pouring little bits here and there, then that is going to cure up so quickly. It's going to overheat and it's going to ruin that resin. You're going to waste that resin. So just decant it out into smaller pots, and that way you will get a lot longer work time with it. It also prevents the resin from heating up and yellowing a little bit, because resin that heats up too quickly will go yellow as well and pull away from the edges. Now, if like me you use a lot of silicone moulds, then it's really important to take care of those silicone moulds if you want to get the best out of them. Now, I absolutely love using moulds. I make my own and I also buy them as well. And sometimes the really cheap moulds can be a little bit more vulnerable than others. But actually, if you take good care of them, then you're going to get a nice life out of them. I always store my moulds in these plastic bags. I knock all the air out of them and then I keep them nice and tight, because that way it prevents them from drying out as much as they would if they were just left in the open air. Also, it's important to ensure that your moulds are stored flat and away from light, because you don't want the sunlight to dry out your mould. I keep these in a set of drawers and I always ensure that they are as flat as possible with the least amount of air in them. Before I store them, I always as well give them a really light coating of release spray, because that keeps them from drying out really quickly. It also keeps them nice and shiny and it prolongs the life. And also, next time you use it, your stuff's going to pop out really easily. I have got a whole video on how you can clean, store and protect all your moulds, and again I will link that at the end of this video. So if you want to check it out, if you haven't already seen it, then you can check that one out. Personal safety is a really big thing and it's so important, and it's something that I talk about an awful lot. I have a warning in my description and I have a couple of videos on how to protect yourself. It is so important to protect yourself. I personally am extremely allergic to resin, so I have to be very, very careful when I'm using resin. I didn't used to be, but I've kind of become quite sensitive to it, and now I get contact dermatitis really, really bad if I'm not careful. Now, I do have a little bit of it on my head there, and that must be where I inadvertently touched my head, just briefly washed it off, and now I have to use a steroid cream on it. But this is the mask that I use. It's a full face mask. It's really easy to put on. It's very comfortable, but that's why I do voiceover whenever I'm pouring my resin. It's got 3 micron vapored and chemical filters on it. They're not expensive, but it is worth every penny. I don't get any eye problems now or anything like that. Additionally, I always wear nitrile gloves, and I sometimes wear them more than once if they're not damaged, and they work really well. I also have an industrial fan there in my room that really does suck out any of the fumes, and I leave that running until the resin is completely cured. I also have another fan which is there. Now I can reverse that fan. It wasn't expensive, but I can turn it so it reverses and blows in, or I can turn it so it shuts off completely and closes down. Now if you're not in a situation where you can have a fan going like that to extract out of your room, then my recommendation is ensure that you're working in a well ventilated area with windows open, no animals or anything like that, and the door shut so any fumes can't get around the rest of the house. And also have a fan, a normal fan, behind you that is blowing the fumes away from you and towards the window, and that will really, really help. Personal safety, really important. Again, I have a video on it. It is linked in the description below. Take care of yourself, people. Now, there are lots of different powders that you can use in your resin, and as you've probably seen in some of my videos, I have a whole playlist on experiments where I've used Epsom salt, bicarbonate of soda, lots of different things to get different effects. The most common ones are mica powders, glitters, pigments. But I also use things like marble dust. I love the effect that gives. I use aluminium powder, and I make my own pigments as well. I do have videos on everything that I'm talking about today, and they're easily found because I love the way that titanium dioxide creates a beautiful white. It absolutely does create a beautiful white. Now, if you're using something that's dry, like a dry powder, it doesn't really matter how much you put in it. I mean, I've used sand in mine, and I've used 100% sand to 100% resin. I've used loads of mica powder in it, really, and made a paste. It doesn't matter. As long as it's a completely dry ingredient, you're not going to have any problem with it if it's made and used for resin. So feel comfortable adding a little extra bit of pigment, little extra bit of glitter or mica powder. No problem. Now, the pot life of resin, which means how long it will stay in the pot, until it's cured up or not be able to use it anymore varies depending on which resin you're using, which I've mentioned a little bit earlier. And as an example, the pot life for polyurethane resin against the pot life for, say, a jewellery resin is very, very different. Now, the jewellery resin, I will probably get a pot life of about 35 minutes, as long as it's not too deep in the pot, where the polyurethane resin, I will probably only get a pot life of about between 4 and 5 minutes at the most. So make sure that you read the instructions on your resin and are aware of how much time you have to use your resin up and how deep it should be kept in the pot, because you don't want to be wasting a load of resin, like 500 grams of resin, because it's cured up really, really quickly. Silicone mats are an absolute vital part of resin, I believe, or working with resin. They not only keep your work area clean, but they are really easy to wipe down if you get anything on them, and easy to keep clean. Now, what I do is I clean up my resin, my silicone mats every week, because I have quite a few. I store them in cut-out drain pipe, as you can see here. Roll them up and store them. And then when I've cleaned them up and I've got all the bits off them that I know I can get off, I then pop them in the washing machine. Now, I'm not recommending this. This is just what I do. I pop them on a wash of about 40 degrees with some soap, with some washing powder in there, and put them on for about an hour, and then I hang them on the line. They're normally dry within about an hour because it's silicone, and that brings them up lovely and clean. But I always go over with the baby wipe first, like this, and I always pull off any bits of resin that are stuck to it. Now, if there's any bits that I can't get off, like there's a little bit there, I will just use a bit of tape first, like this, bit of sticky tape, push that down, and that'll pull that off, and then it'll attach it to the tape. And that just saves your mats becoming really dirty and contaminating anything that you're using. These as well are dirt cheap, and there is a toolkit that you can get, which I will link in the description below, that comes with silicone mats, mixing jugs, sticks, pipettes, all the things you need, and it is really, really cheap. It's great value. So I will link that in the description below. I'd just like to say a quick thank you to all my members whose names are coming up now. Thank you for your support. I hope you're enjoying the live streams that we do on how to set up your own business and how to sell your arts and crafts. And we will be moving over soon to a new series on live streams, and I will let you know what that's about soon. Never use a torch on silicone moulds. However you are tempted, never use one. And the reason is a torch will be far hotter than any oven or anything that you could do with silicone. It will burn the silicone, and you are really likely to meld your resin onto your silicone and then destroy the mold and ruin the project that you're using. I always use a long-necked lighter like this, and these are fairly readily available. I will link them in the description below. I think I get about 3 or 4 for about £4, so they're very, very cheap, and you can refill them and they work brilliantly. That flame is nowhere near as hot as that flame, and as a result it won't burn your mold, and it's really, really going to increase the lifetime and the use of your molds. I'd just like to say a quick thank you to all the people that bought me a coffee last month. Thank you very much, and your names are on my coffee board. And if you'd like to buy me a coffee this month and help support this channel and allow me to buy all the bits and pieces that I need to film and to make resin stuff with, the link for that is in the description below, and you'll also get your name on my coffee board, and be famous. Now, if you're making something that is a little bit deeper than normal, and actually you don't have a casting resin or you don't have a deep casting resin, then you can pour in different layers. Now, when you're pouring in layers, you are likely to get the layered effect, so it will look and you will be able to see the layers as you've poured it. Now, one way to avoid that being so prominent is to pour your layers before that previous layer is fully cured, so it's kind of like in that firm gel state, and that will help you prevent getting and seeing all those separate layers if you're doing a clear piece. If you're doing a piece with lots of colours and that in it, it really doesn't matter, and you want that nice sharp layered finish. But that's just one of my tips that I think is really, really useful if you're pouring something that's quite large. Never use anything that is wet, like a fresh flower or anything that isn't dried in your resin, because it is going to rot. There'll still be bacteria in there and it will rot, and it is going to look awful. I did do a video of a time lapse of a fresh flower in resin, and if you check that out, that you will see is absolutely awful. You would be devastated if you gave it to somebody. So always use dry ingredients. If you want to use flowers, dry them first and then pop them in your resin. You will find that it will work a lot better and you will get a beautiful result. Also, resin doesn't work or react very well in contact with water, and it can cause it to get like a cloudy effect to it. If you want a shiny finish to your products when you're casting in moulds, then ensure that the mould that you are casting in has a shiny surface. If not, you won't get a shiny finish. These are 2 coaster moulds that I've got, and this one has got quite a dull finish to it. There's a little bit of shine around it, but it's nowhere near as shiny as this one. Therefore, this will produce a dull casting, and this one will produce a nice glossy casting. Now, there are ways that you can overcome that after the casting has been done. Again, I do have a video on that, but it's best to avoid dull moulds. Now, I know of no way at the moment that you can polish a mould or bring that shine back. That's why it's important to follow the tip that I talked about earlier about how to store your moulds. It will keep them shinier for a lot longer. Also, a lot of heat will make the moulds go a little bit dull, and leaving resin in them for too long after it's cured will also create a dull mould a lot quicker. So ensure that your moulds are glossy before you cast in them if you want a glossy finish. Now, I know I've talked about quite a few tips here and tricks and things that are important, and I'm sure there's some that I've missed out. So if I've missed some out that you think are really important, then let me know in the comments below, because other people will read that as well, and it's a great way of sharing good practice and great experiences with developing and using resin. My last tip is cover moulds and things when you have finished your pouring to stop dust and flies and other bits and pieces landing in it and ruining. I use these, which are food covering. I found these to be brilliant. I have a few of these. I will again link them in the description below. And they work really, really well, and they're quite large. But if you haven't got these, then cover them with a clean box or something that's Tupperware to ensure that nothing is going to get in them. Now, my bonus tip is, a lot of people say I use alcohol and I use it in a mister and I mist it over the top of my mould to get rid of bubbles. Now, that will get rid of bubbles, and it gets rid of bubbles really well. I never use it in my studio. Firstly, isopropyl alcohol is very bad for you if it's breathed in. So if you're spraying it in your studio or work area, ensure you're wearing a mask and you've got great extraction. The other thing is, if at any time you've sprayed it and there's a fine mist of alcohol that you're not even aware of, it is very flammable. So don't go using a lighter until you're completely clear of ensuring that, because I know people that have got in difficulty over this in the past. The other thing is lifetime of your moulds dramatically. Alcohol absolutely strips the surface off and gets rid of the gloss and make them really quite dull quite quickly. But it's up to you. A lot of people use that method. I don't personally. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed making it. I love sharing my experience and the knowledge that I have, and I love learning from other people as well. So don't forget to leave your comment in the description if you've got some tips that you think will be really useful for me and for other people reading them. Everything that I've talked about today, I will put links to in the description below. So if you want to get hold of it, it's really easy to get hold of, along with the links to the videos that I've mentioned as well that I've already made. I will link those in the description, as well as putting the cards at the end of this video. Don't forget to boot that like button. It really does help this video get out there, and it allows more people to learn and understand the important things about resin and the tips and tricks. Take care, enjoy your resin, bye.